Hi everyone, this is Lara Jade of Lara Jade Photography, and I've collaborated with Greater Than Gatsby to bring you the new Editorial Retouch sets. The purpose of this video tutorial is to show you how the editorial sets work and give you some tips and tricks on how to make the workflow work best for you. Remember, it will require some patience because in order to get the best results out of this set, the process for many of the steps need to be adjusted manually. However, with a little practice and referencing both the instructions within the sets and watching this video, you'll be able to follow along in no time at all. Step 1. Clone and heal. So I always like to start with what I call the cleanup layer. And this action simply duplicates your background layer, but it will also be the layer that the other actions work from. So please be sure to use this step before adjusting any of the other steps. Use this layer to modify your image, removing blemishes, erasing stray hairs, and liquefying your subject. So we're going to go ahead and click the play button on the cleanup layer, and if any point you get stuck with the instructions, you can find a detailed instruction list by clicking play within the action palette itself. The first tool we're going to use is the liquefy tool. So go ahead and click filter, liquefy. Liquefy is a tool that allows you to push and pull pixels in any way that you desire. The trick to using this tool is using it very minimally. Now this tool is often abused by many in the fashion and photography industry, so I prefer to use this tool to adjust the composition and change my subject very subtly. There's often times when you don't even need to use liquefy in an image, and it's because sometimes images don't need it. For this particular image, there's very minimal adjustments going to be made, but I'll show you how I use it manually. So the first thing I'm going to do is use what we call the forward warp tool, and this is the finger here with the pointed finger on it. This allows us to technically push in areas that we want to push in. So I'm going to use a brush size here, maybe around 540. Brush density I like to change anywhere between 50 and 60 I think works best. Brush pressure I like to keep on halfway at around 50. So I'm going to go ahead and just start using this to kind of pull in areas of my subject. Now what I don't want to do is go ahead and pull in that area really quick, because that's essentially going to pull in all the background. It's going to be very obvious to the viewer that it's been used. I also use it to just pull in and make the neck just a little bit more elongated. Same with the arm here. I'm just pulling in just slightly. I'm going to zoom into my subject's face. She's so beautiful anyway, she doesn't need really any work, but I'm just making very subtle changes that will be easy to view to the eye. In the nose just slightly. In the eyebrow, taking in the eyebrow down here, and here, taking in the ear, and just adjusting this neckline here as well. So again, very subtle changes I'm making. Also going to use this to kind of take in the areas here, like so, and create more of a smoother line. And this can be adjusted later on within the clone tool itself. And another useful tool here is to use what we call the freeze mask tool. So this allows us to select an area that we don't want to move, and then we can actually push the area without adjusting any other area of the image, because if we use this without the Thaw Mask tool, this area of the arm would be pulled as well. So we're going to move that in for composition, click OK. And as you can see from the before and after, again, it's a very subtle change, but just helps, elongating the neck, subtle changes on my subject as well. The next step in the cleanup workflow is to use the Spot Heal Brush tool. This can be found on the left-hand side in the Tools palette, and it's the first option. I like to start working with the Spot Heal Brush tool before anything else, because it allows me to quickly remove blemishes and imperfections, and the tool works very similar to the Heal Brush tool, but doesn't require us to sample a specific area of the image. Instead, the brush automatically samples an area for us. So at the very top here, make sure your mode is set to normal, type on proximity match, and make sure the checkbox for sample all layers is ticked. You also want to make sure that the hardness is at 0% to make sure that we have smooth sampling. we're going to zoom into our subject, and I feel like a brush of around 20 pixels works best here. Depending on whether you have a beauty image or a full-length image, you may want to change that according to what pixel size you have. So what we're going to do is click here over areas that need sampling, and I like to use this pretty quickly, so I'm constantly going in to an area of skin that I find distracting, to kind of smooth out the texture and to kind of clean up areas as well. So if you're following along as you're retouching, feel free to spend a little bit of time working on this, as I'm going to here to show you the full effect of how it works. So we want to make sure that we're not getting rid of any of this area under the eye, because this is where naturally the eyeball is. So if you start to remove that area, it starts to look quite plastic and fake. So remember, subtlety is key when it comes to retouching images like this. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time retouching this part of the image, so feel free to skip this part if you already know how to use this tool or you want to get to the next step as well. A really helpful tool when you come to editing and retouching from different angles is the Rotate View tool, that can be found on the left-hand side here, or by using the R key on your keyboard. And it allows you to turn around your image to be able to seamlessly retouch and move around to quicken up your workflow. As you can see from the before and after, there's quite a subtle change been made on the subject's skin, like so. And if this was me working on my image to produce to a client and to send into toning a bit later on, I'd spend at least 20 minutes to an hour, again depending on the image. For a portrait image, maybe 20 to 30 minutes. A beauty image could take 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on how in depth it is as well. I also like to use the spot heal brush tool for these areas on the neck here, for necklines and things like that. Just sampling a little bit larger for those as well, in these areas on the chin. Okay, so at that point I would be pretty happy with where my image is with the initial cleanup, and I'm going to move on to step 2. My next step in the workflow cleanup is to use the heal brush tool. Now, the difference between the heal brush tool and the spot heal is that we have to sample an area and place it where we would like it on the image. So I like to use this after the spot heal brush tool because there's a little bit more manual control. The main benefits of using the heal is that it matches the texture, lighting, transparency and shading of the sample pixels to those being healed. But the difference with this one is to be sure that your mode is on normal, source is on sampled, and you want to make sure this time that your sample is on current and below. So what we're going to do is click on an area like here and then sample over it. So it's really great for those kind of crosshairs over the face, other areas where you want to sample crosshairs on the head as well. For larger areas of kind of the skin here, I'm just going ahead and just clicking an area with my Alt on my keyboard and then selecting an area to go over as well. So there's a little bit more manual control involved here, but I spend the majority of my time using this tool over the spot heal tool. Remember, the spot heal tool is a quick way of retouching, and this heal brush tool gives me more manual control, and I like to use it for things like the eyebrows, just under the eyes as well. But remember to sample from an area of tone. So here to here, this area of tone to here, this area of tone to here. You wouldn't want to go here and sample it here because the area is very different in tone as well. So if you're following along as you're retouching, feel free to spend a little bit of time working on this, as I'm going to, just to show you the final effect of spending some time on this. And it does require some patience, but again, the results are very pleasing once you have spent quite a bit of time on that. Okay, so once I've spent quite a bit of time working on this, and you know, I've only spent a few minutes here just working on the basics, but you can already see the effect of what I'm doing here and how it's really helping the overall image, but still retaining some texture there as well. The next step when working on the cleanup layer is to use the clone tool. I use the clone stamp tool to duplicate objects or remove areas such as distracting elements within the backgrounds of my images. Often the heal and spot tool can't handle larger areas, and I would prefer to clone a specific part of an image to another. Or perhaps even if I had a different image open within the Photoshop window and that I wanted to take a part of image 1 and place it within image 2. So the difference in settings here is if we select that, and that's the third one going down, the difference here is that we need the opacity to be at 100, the flow to be at 100, and we want to make sure current and below is set. Now I'm going to use this on specific parts of the images where I need to clone an area out and replace it with another area. Now using the heal and the sample would blend this area of the dress in with the background. Now that's not what we want with this tool. What we want is to make sure we're cloning an area and sample it. So we're alt clicking on a sampled area and then we're placing it over the top of the image as well. So again, this takes a little bit of practice to get right, but I like to sample from similar areas. So I'm sampling from the bottom of that dress, top there, and pulling it in as well. I'm going to remove this large part of hair because it's a little bit distracting. And again, my brush size just varies depending on what I'm working with as well. So depending on what you're working with in the background, your brush size will change, and you can change here. And remember, hardness is always at 0%. So I'm just looking for those areas within my image. This line here is quite distracting. This white area as well. This area is quite distracting. So you'll see that. These two parts here. And there's some darker parts in this area that I just want to go ahead and remove, because I chose this background because I like the character within the wall and the color. But what I'm trying to do is keep that character by keeping the texture. I'm just cleaning it up exactly as I would do the skin. Okay, so I'm just going to go out of my image and show you, I'm just removing those distracting elements from the image there as well. So my favorite part of this action set, and what I think most of you will find useful, is the skin corrector. And that is found at step 2 here on the actions palette. And you have the option to change this in 8-bit and 16-bit. So skin correction is simply what we know in the industry as frequency separation. And it allows us to separate the textures and tones. First, we're going to click on the paintbrush tool over here. So we have our opacity at 100% and our flow at 3%. Then we're going to click skin correction 8-bit. You'll notice it now opens a group. So we want to make sure we're painting on this layer only here. And that using the paintbrush tool here, we hover over the area we want to pick up from. We click Alt to get the eyedropper tool, click on that area we want to sample, and then simply paint over the area of darker tone to correct that blotchy skin. And again, we want to make sure that we're doing this very subtly, changing the brush size depending on what we need, going in just under here, and you'll notice how subtle my changes are just there. Don't try and use this over an area of a lot of darkness, for example, if we painted over the area of the eye here. Otherwise, again, it's going to start to look quite fake, and we want to try and achieve that natural look with this kind of skin retouch. Going to work with the neck, selecting this area as well. So you can see the before and after here. I'm going to just take that down to where I think it works best, so maybe around 80%. And you can see from here how that's kind of just removed those blotchy areas of skin, especially on the forehead there. Step 3 is makeup correction, and this step is best used for makeup enhancement. I like to use this on the eyes or the lips where eyeshadow or lipstick has been applied. So pretty much all this does is allows us to make a grey layer, and then we're going to use the eyedropper tool and the paintbrush to apply it. So for this specific brush, what we want is opacity at 100% and flow anywhere between 12 and 15%. I'm going to start with 15 there. Then we're going to click Alt, which brings up the eyedropper. Click on an area of makeup, change the brush size to where you're adding it, around here, and paint that on to the eye like so. Then we're going to pick up the purple color and do the same there and the same there. Change the brush size to kind of go under the eye just a little bit. So that's just enhancing the makeup there. And then with the lips, we're going to do the same thing. Go into the lips like so, kind of helping that peachy color kind of come through like that. So you can see how that's helped that area with the skin and the makeup. And then you have the option of changing the opacity here. So I'm going to bring that down to around 30, because again, we just kind of want that subtle change, and it's just to enhance what's there as well. Step 4 is non-destructive skin contouring, which is effectively dodge and burn. So non-destructive simply means we are not altering the original image, we are working on a layer on top of the image. So if we go down to skin contouring and click dodge and burn, it opens this group, which is dodge the highlights and burn the shadows. Without this grey layer, the colour and hue of the original image would be significantly altered. In this set, we are simply dodging the highlights and burning the shadows. I like to use this for contouring my subject's skin or highlighting or darkening areas of the background as well. So with dodging and burning, the dodge the highlights is essentially using the white brush tool, making sure white is selected down here, and make sure your brush mode at the very top is set to lighten. We're going to go into our subject here, and we're going to change the opacity of the flow. I'm going to keep this opacity at 100 and flow at 15, because we can always change the effect of it within the layers palette here. So essentially what we're doing when we're dodging is kind of going in and painting onto our subject's skin where the light is. I'm going to go down again, kind of enhance the nose there, go down, get the chin, going to go into the top of the lip. So this is where natural light falls when working with the subject. It's usually here on the forehead, on the nose, at the top of the lip and the chin. And I also like to go into my subject's eyes here and just paint on that white bit and enhance that area as well, maybe on the corners of the makeup. And then I'm just going to take that opacity down to about 30%, And as you can see, I'm just going in and highlighting areas very specifically. And I like to play around here with the opacity as I'm going through. I would just leave it on around 5% flow and opacity 100 if you're very new to this. But if you are familiar with it, play with it a little bit more and then take the opacity down to get your desired effect, because I like to see it kind of full effect and then pull it back afterwards as well. Just going to go in here to the eye. As well, get in that area, let my flow up a little bit more there inside the eye. Because again, we always want to make sure the eyes stand out because they're going to be what engages the subject. So as you can see here, that's made a significant amount of change, but again, very subtle, and even maybe take this down to around 26% as well. So now we're going to move on to burn the shadows. So this is a very similar effect. It's the same layer, but this time we're going to choose the paintbrush tool and we're going to go on the black brush, and then we're going to change the mode. Instead of lighten, we're going to go to darken. I'm going to change our brush mode up here. And I want this to be a little more subtle than the dodge because there's less darker tones within the image. So I'm going to go here around maybe 10%. And I'm just going to slightly contour my subject, maybe even go down to around 5% here. Contour the areas, go back there, that I want. And there's not much I really want to change with the burn-in, especially with the hair and everything. I want to go in and mainly just kind of enhance these eyes. I'm going to go down again on my brush size, enhancing this kind of area if I can. I'm going to even try and enhance these eyelashes here if I can, making them stand out a little bit more. Get up my brush size. Paint around that area, so as you can see, that's helping there. I'm going to go in and maybe just darken this very crease. Oh, there's probably a little too much there. Going back, darken that crease like so, and maybe even going in and enhancing these brows just slightly, like this, kind of to fill them out a little bit more. Very swift movements. And not every image needs this. I try and get everything in camera as much as I can, but sometimes, you're working with certain beauty clients, portrait, and it just requires a little bit of fill-in as well, whether it's makeup, enhancements on the brows, things like that. So as we can see there, how much that's been changed. Then we want to bring it back and just kind of take a look at what the dodge and burn has done to my subject there. So when I get asked, how do you get that painterly look? It really is just about perfecting the skin and kind of enhancing the dodge and burn and getting a good makeup artist as well. One more thing to remember, that when you've finished working with the dodge and burn, remember to change your mode back to normal, because there's been a lot of people that I work with on workshops or teaching people personal lessons, and I find that they forget that this is on darken. So it's an easy mistake to make, so just make sure that's back on normal there. And then we're going to jump straight into doing step 5, which is feature enhancement, which is pretty much what it says in the title. And again, you've got your instructions there, but the feature enhancement pretty much is enhancing the catch lights and whitening teeth. So some portrait photographers might find this really helpful and part of their workflow. You can skip this step if you don't need it, but I'm going to show you guys how those catch lights work. So click and play on enhanced catch lights. It's really easy. We go into our subject's eyes. We've got enhanced catch lights there. We're going to use a soft white brush, low opacity. So we want to put the flow up, but we want the low opacity, maybe around 20%. We might even go in and change that a little more in a second once I see the result. Yeah, we can change that more. just going to go in and brighten those eyes just slightly there. I'm painting on what's already there, so the irises. So remember that the eyes in an image will help your subject stand out and engage as well with your viewer. So it's very important that they stand out to whoever's looking at the image. You know, it helps sell product. It's great for portraits. I'm just going to go in and use that to kind of enhance this area of the eye just there as well. So cheating a little bit kind of gives you an idea of how it can work. So again, very subtle change, but enough to kind of help that eye stand out because she's got great eyes. We just kind of want to enhance them. Whiten teeth is pretty straightforward. It's the same thing as iris enhancement. And we can't see her teeth too well in this, but I'm going to give you an idea. We're just going to go over the teeth with a really small brush just to kind of whiten those pearly whites, like so. And you can see the before and after. I don't want to do too much on these back ones because they are in the shadow there, so we may want to take that opacity down just a little bit, like so. So as you can see, with that feature enhancement, white teeth, and enhance those eyes. I'm just going to bring those catch lights down just a little bit, maybe 39%, because she's already 40% got quite bright eyes there as well. So once we've wrapped that up and you're pretty happy with where all of this is at, the next step is to do sharpening. And again, not every image needs to be sharpened, but sometimes, you want to go in and sharpen some product, you want to sharpen the eyes to make them more engaging. So we're going to start with the eyes first. So we click on Sharpen Eyes. And all it requires is to go in, again, all of these are very similar, these last steps. We go in with the white brush. I'm going to go into the eye, and we're just going to sharpen that eye there. I'm going to bring the opacity up, like so. The same with this eye. We can also do it to the eyelashes as well to help them stand out. Sharpen eyes, like that. Helps those eyes stand out, but we're going to bring that down maybe to around 50%. Okay, and the last one is sharpen jewelry. Now we don't have any jewelry in this shot, but I want to show you how it works on the beading and sequins on this dress. So I'm going to go in, same thing, put your opacity quite high because we can change that after. We're going to go in and just sharpen that detail all over the subject here, 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 they're not in focus, and here as well. I'm just going to bring that back again to around 50%, like so. Zooming out of my subject. At this point, I'm fairly happy with how the image is at. The approach I've took is very natural with the dodge and burn, with the heel, the clone. I'm just removing distracting elements. I'm enhancing what's there. The main thing I've tried to get across in this kind of tutorial is keep everything subtle. Everything you do, take the opacity down. Your methods of painting things on with the brush, keep that at a low opacity. So I hope you found my workflow useful. And if you are interested in seeing the before and after, here it is. So you can see before, after. You can see how much, those changes have been made, but we're still keeping everything as natural as possible. This retouch set comes free with the purchase of my location and studio editorial action sets. You can find more information at www.greaterthangatsby.com. If you would like more information on my work, go to www.larajade.com. Thank you.